Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello and welcome to the Strokecast. I'm Bill Monroe. This week we're going to talk again about a few more housekeeping things, and then we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about everybody's favorite joint, the shoulder. But first, some housekeeping stuff. Welcome to week 5 of the Strokecast. How do you like it so far? Go ahead and let us know in the comments for episode 5 over at strokecast.com, or just go ahead and shoot me an email. You can reach me at bill@strokecast.com. One of the things you'll notice I use on the site are affiliate links. So, for example, I have a page on the website that goes to a bunch of different products that I use, some for my stroke recovery, some for improving public speaking skills, and some other tools and assorted things that are on Amazon. Those are actually affiliate links. What that means is that if you click on one of those links and go to Amazon, for the next 24 hours or so, I will get a small piece of whatever it is you purchase over there. Now, of course, that doesn't affect the price you pay or anything like that. It's just a tool that many bloggers and podcasters use. So I generally will use affiliate links to Amazon whenever I talk about specific products and things like that for, well, obvious reasons. And I will also tell you when I am using an affiliate link in the interest of pure transparency. Another note for this week is have a little bit of follow-up to last week's episode where I talked about my travels on the Joko cruise. And if you missed that, you can go back and check out episode 4 where I talked all about my experience taking the Jonathan Colton cruise. This year I traveled with my friend John Clark, who is also the producer of the Caffeinated Comics podcast. And the latest episode of Caffeinated Comics features John and I talking about the cruise. In this case, it's not from an accessibility perspective, but it's more from the perspective of John as a first-time cruiser, a brand new sea monkey, as we like to say, trying to understand just what the experience is about and looking at it through new eyes and a new approach to thinking about just what's happening. I've done it 6 times in a row, but this was his first time. So the conversation between us then becomes a lot more about sort of what it all means, in addition to just some of the other cool stuff that he and I did together and separately during our week on the boat. If you're already a subscriber to the Caffeinated Comics podcast, you can check it out in the latest episode, or you can just go to strokecast.com/newmonkey. That's new monkey, one word. Some of the content in there may be not safe for work. It may earn its explicit tag once or twice. For the most part, the discussion is just sort of a very casual, trying to understand just what that experience is like. So with that said, let's go ahead and talk about shoulders. Now, prior to my stroke, I used to think that the knee was probably the single worst designed joint in the body. I mean, the kneecap doesn't even really connect to the other bones. It just sort of floats there and ends up causing all sorts of trouble. But as I've learned, it's clearly the shoulder that is the biggest mess of design in the body. The shoulder to go up and down and in and out and in, let us flap our wings and scrunch things back and rotate around. It is really a mishmash of muscles and tendons and ligaments and all sorts of other stuff. We've got large muscles holding the shoulder in that pretty much span half the back. We've got small muscles controlling the shoulder that are buried deeper within there. We've got little nodules of bone sticking out in various places, and all sorts of things get tied up into there. It ends up sort of looking like it's a major structure that's just sort of held together with duct tape. And after a stroke, that tape really starts to stretch out. Subluxation is an issue that many stroke survivors have heard about, and it's something we really need to be aware of. Essentially what happens in subluxation is the shoulder sort of starts to fall apart and the arm starts to fall away from the body. it's almost like there were competing work orders within the body, where there's one work order in the brain that's trying to go through recovery and do the PT, and it's like, okay, let's go ahead and get this connection. Let's get this shoulder and this arm working again. Whereas there's a competing work order in there, which is saying, well, we're not using the arm anymore, so let's just get rid of it. And that's what the body sort of starts trying to do. It's not using it. It's not using those muscles. It's not getting anything there. So it's just going to sort of let it go. So it sort of becomes a behavior of the shoulder to just sort of fall apart and to almost want to dislocate itself. As this subluxation goes on, it's actually something that you can see and feel in the gap between the top of the shoulder and the top of the arm. And as it gets bad, it can look kind of creepy, and it can really start to hurt because that mishmash of muscles and bones that's in there is no longer aligned in the right way. And when it's not aligned in the right way, things can grind, things can twist, and things can just sort of start moving around in ways that they shouldn't, and then they seize up and they don't want to move around, and then you've got the tone kicking in on some of those muscles, which complicates that even further as some just get really tense and others don't do anything. All the while, your brain is trying to rewire some neurons to get some more information, not only to that shoulder, but through that shoulder, to be able to take control once again of the biceps and the triceps and of the lower arm and ultimately of the hand and the fingers. And all of that goes through the shoulder. And when the shoulder is messed up, all of that other stuff is messed up as well. Because remember that in recovery, what is typically going to happen when you have hemiparesis or something similar where the arm doesn't work and the leg doesn't work, is that the body is going to start rebuilding itself and rebuilding its connections from the trunk out. So first, the shoulder has to be recovering so you can get to the upper arm. And once the upper arm is recovering, then you can get more into the elbow and the forearm. And once they're recovering, then you can start getting into the wrist and the hand and ultimately the fingers. But you got to get through that first part first to really be effective. Because also, as it turns out, things that control the fingers also get influenced by what's happening elsewhere in the arm. All of that control isn't just in the hand itself. It extends throughout that whole limb. Moving the hand and using the fingers and the arm and the shoulder, it's all like some orchestral symphony. And you have to have all of the instruments playing their part in the same key and in tune in order for it to work. And if you don't have everything aligned and working together in just the right way, it's not going to sound good at all. So this subluxation, as the arm starts to pull itself away from the rest of the body, makes it hard to get all of the use back. In addition, it can simply be painful. So a lot of time, especially early in my stroke recovery, was spent on figuring out how to avoid shoulder subluxation with the support of my occupational therapists. And really, there are two key elements that come into avoiding shoulder subluxation in the short term and in the long term. And they are support and, of course, exercise. There are a number of different options for supporting the shoulder. And once I got home, that was simply a case of when I'm sitting on the couch, I had an extra armrest, an extra sort of pillow I could use as an armrest right next to me that I could put my arm on. So the simple weight of my arm, and by the way, your arm weighs a lot more than you might think. It actually can be a significant part of your body weight. But I had to just rest that arm on that cushion so gravity itself wasn't yanking the arm away. And you'll see other support options in the hospital or at home. Some people will have a wheelchair that has a shelf on it in order to support that arm so that that arm not only doesn't just sort of flop into the wheel off the side when you don't have control over it, but also to provide that extra support for the shoulder. When laying in bed, it's pillows. And I ended up, at night sleeping with multiple pillows. I would have a pillow underneath my feet to sort of elevate my legs to promote circulation, and I would have to have another pillow under my left arm to support that, so that even during the middle of the night as I was sleeping, gravity wasn't working to pull that away. And also in my own twisting and turning, I wasn't putting extra strain on the shoulder. By the time I was ready to leave the hospital, I think we had somehow accumulated upwards of 15 or 16 different pillows in the room that were used to support various parts of my body throughout my stay, and that managed to also migrate over to the girlfriend's cot to try and make her stay a little bit more pleasant, because while it was awesome they brought a cot in for her with a mattress on it and everything, it seemed as though the mattress was being used to store canned goods in the event of an air raid. And when I finally got home, I was again using a pillow to support that arm while I slept, and okay, sometimes I was using a stuffed bear to support my arm while I slept as well. And if anybody gives you grief for using a stuffed animal to help support your arm, you can just tell them off, because you've just dealt with a stroke. And if you want to hold on to a stuffed bear to help support your arm while you're going through all this recovery, by golly, that is your right. And be proud of that. In addition to the pillows and the shelves and the bears and the other support, another thing they did in the hospital to help support my arm and help minimize subluxation was my favorite, and that was Kinesio tape. If you've seen the Summer Olympics, you have seen Kinesio tape. That's that fancy colored tape you see on the athletes in funky patterns wrapped around their knees or their shoulders or their backs or wherever else they think it might help. The Kinesio tape actually allows for some stretching, but also springs that back to provide some resistance against that as well. So it can really do a nice job of supporting a limb. In this case, my OT applied that strip of Kinesio tape across my shoulder and my upper arm, and I'll tell you, I was all ready to enter the next Olympic Games. It made me feel like a powerful athlete for the first time in my life. Well, okay, not really, but maybe I kind of started to look the part since I had now this piece of tape across my shoulder. So the Kinesio tape becomes one more piece in the puzzle and one more part of a comprehensive solution to address things like subluxation. Another tool I had to address shoulder subluxation was something I used once I got out of the hospital, and that was a GivMohr Sling, and that's GivMohr, and I will link to the GivMohr Sling in the show notes for episode 5 over at strokecast.com. Now, the GivMohr Sling is designed to support the shoulder while at the same time not restraining it. It doesn't force the arm into a curled up position like a traditional sling would. It gives the arm some more freedom to move while you walk and to swing a little bit and to just give it more flexibility that way. So it doesn't encourage the body to get into a position that is just full of tone. Now, it's an interesting product. It is challenging to put on at first. It took me a while to get the hang of that. When I'm wearing it, it actually has a loop that goes over my right shoulder. The straps go across my back and then down my left arm to my hand. So my hand is actually holding onto a plastic tube, and that's my affected hand, my weak hand. And that sling goes across the whole arm to ultimately support that shoulder. So I mean, that's interesting. Like I said, it is a little challenging to put on. The other thing it does is that it does occupy my hand with something. So that has pluses and negatives. For one thing, on the positive side, it actually prevents my hand from curling into a full fist and letting tone completely take over my fingers and try to drive my fingernails into the palm of my hand, which is, of course, a bad thing. At the same time, though, because I now do have this thing in my fist, it also means that I can't really do much therapy with my left hand while I'm wearing the sling. And I can't actually use my left hand to hold on to other things or to carry other things while I'm wearing the sling. So these days, here I am, 9 months or so post-stroke, and shoulder subluxation really is not a huge issue for me anymore. I've got enough strength back in the shoulder so that it's not necessarily a problem. So I don't wear the sling around the apartment. I usually only wear it when I go outside now. And I wear it out and about for a couple of reasons. It does still provide some support. It does help prevent the tone from completely kicking in on my arm. And perhaps most importantly, it's an obvious signal to other people on the street or in Costco that there is actually something wrong with that arm and that I can't actually use it. So it provides that extra signal so people can give me a little bit of extra space or not assume I can use both hands. And actually, let me make a correction there. While it's a signal that something is wrong in my arm, of course, there is absolutely nothing wrong with my arm. It is all in my head. But the GivMohr Sling does provide that extra protection outside. It also keeps my arm from sort of wandering about while I'm driving and using my good arm for that and some other things like that. So it has some nice advantages for that, but after a certain amount of time, the shoulder subluxation becomes less of an issue because of the long-term solution related to shoulder sublux, and that is exercise. And it seems that the solution to most things in the therapy world are do more exercises. And in this case, yeah, that is what's happening. The best way to prevent shoulder sublux where the shoulder pulls away long term is to use those muscles. And using those muscles and doing that exercise means you minimize tone. It helps you keep those muscles strong. It keeps the scapula and those other bones moving and sliding about the way they're supposed to. In addition to that, the exercise helps regain use. It's, again, one of those things. The more you use it, the more connections the brain is going to build back into that. And that stuff helps, whether it's exercises that you're doing directly, or sometimes it's helpful for just a therapist who's going to go ahead and manipulate that and rub those muscles in the right way and push them in the right place and slide them over here and there. It's about getting that exercise and getting that motion to engage those muscles and to help make sure those ligaments and those tendons don't shrink up, and to help make sure that strength and that base is there so that the body has enough strength to keep its own arm attached. And some of the key exercises for this are doing things like shoulder rolls, rolling the shoulders forward and back and doing, dozens or hundreds of those, and doing the shoulder shrugs and holding those, and pulling the shoulder blades back to sort of pinch the shoulder blades together, and then pulling the shoulders forward. Moving the arm up and down and cross body to simulate drawing a sword or putting on a seatbelt. Sliding a dish towel back and forth across the table to work on reach and stretch. All of these exercises ultimately, have a large part to do with strengthening various muscles and movements in the shoulder to help prevent shoulder subluxation and to go ahead and regain more and more use of that limb. And if those motions are not causing pain, it's important to just go ahead and do it and to go ahead and do those exercises. Because ultimately, if it doesn't cause pain, we just gotta do it. Building that long-term strength is key to preventing shoulder subluxation. And to do that, we gotta get the exercise to do it. We gotta get the fuel to support that exercise. We've got to get the support so that we're in a position to do those exercises. And ultimately, we also need to get the rest and the sleep so that the brain has an opportunity to go ahead and consolidate those rewiring efforts and to make the progress that it needs to make. So where am I today? At this point, my shoulder is better than it was in the hospital. I no longer need the tape. There's no visible separation. It doesn't look like my arm is coming off of my shoulder anymore. I have nearly the full range of motion for rotating it around and swinging it back and forth. I even have the strength to move my shoulder around on its own. But I do continue to work on it. I know I still have to do the exercises, and I still have to continue to support that arm when I can. And often that means when I'm sitting down at the computer, I've got my left arm right now sitting on the armrest of my chair. And I have to continue to do that. When I'm sitting on the couch, I continue to have my left arm on the armrest. And one of the things I've discovered in there also is that means when I have my elbow on those couch cushions to support it, it also means I can now use my forearm to support my tablet or my phone and actually angle them up. So yeah, it's a nice way to get a little bit of extra passive use out of the limb as well. I continue to use the sling when I go out in public. I also do continue with the exercises because ultimately I don't want to fall back. And I know that if I keep doing the work, I can keep getting better. So that's my experience with shoulder subluxation and some of the things to keep in mind with sublux and some of the reasons why the therapists keep asking us to do things like support it and do the exercises that they ask us to do. And that brings us to our hack of the week. And this week's hack is mop holders. Now, you may have seen these things used for advertising where you're going to store your mops in your laundry room or your garden tools in the garage. Basically, they have two sort of springy rollers and an adhesive back. So why are they so awesome? Do I really have that many mops? No, actually, I'm not sure how many mops I have. The reason I love these mop holders is that I use them to hold my cane. I have these mop holders stuck to the wall in various parts of my apartment. You can actually see some pictures of this over at strokecast.com in the notes for episode 5. And I'm actually going to link to the specific mop holders that I use on Amazon. Just go to strokecast.com/mop and it will take you right to those. I use these things so that my cane doesn't fall. It means that my cane doesn't just lay on the floor when I'm sitting at the couch or sitting at the dining room table or using the bathroom, because I have these mop holders on the wall for the cane. Because one of the most unfortunately ironic things would be to stand up or have somebody else walk by and then trip over the cane and hurt themselves. And we don't want any of that to happen. When these things are stuck to the wall, it means my cane doesn't fall. I can easily pop it in there and then pop it back out when I need it. It also means that I am less likely to misplace my cane, because if I'm not sure where I left my cane because I put it down and then actually walked a little bit without it, there are about 5 or 6 likely places where it will be, and I can just look around and see it stuck to the wall in some place. So these things are great. They're cheap. And if you are using a cane to get around your apartment or your home, these mop holders are definitely something you want to check out so you can secure your cane to wherever it is you need to secure your cane. Go to strokecast.com/mop to check out the mop holders on Amazon. And that's it for this week. Do you have a story about your stroke recovery or a friend or relative stroke recovery that you want to share on Strokecast? Go ahead and email me. You can reach me again, bill@strokecast.com. How do you deal with shoulder subluxation? Do you have any thoughts or tips for that? Go ahead and leave a comment on episode 5 at strokecast.com. If you're enjoying Strokecast, go ahead and subscribe in your favorite podcast app and encourage a friend or relative to subscribe as well. Check out the mop holders over at strokecast.com/mop. And of course, as always, don't get best. Get better. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you next week.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.